Welcome, everybody, to leveraging AR, VR, and wearables to drive ROI. We've got a fantastic panel group today. And before we get right into discussion, I would like each of the panelists to give their full name, their role, and their experience in extended media. So we'll first start with Janelle.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Janelle Haynes. I am a human factors and ergonomic engineer for John Deere. And I have been working using the wearable technologies and virtual reality technologies in the manufacturing field, really focusing on safety and ergonomics and how we can use this to test designs ahead of time to prevent injuries and keep our employees safe.
Well, thanks very much, Janelle. Jeff?
Yeah, Jeff Lien. I'm a technical leader at Andersen Windows in our digital innovation space. Been working with AR and VR for probably 6 years now, primarily focused on our sales and marketing side of the business. So I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Oh, thanks very much there, Jeff. And Robert?
Yeah, hello everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Robert Copelan, and I work in IT innovation for the ZF Group. We are a global company headquartered in Germany in the automotive industry. And among other things, I have a responsibility in the group for AR and VR. We've been working with it about 4 years and taking a little bit different approach than most companies. Be excited to talk about that.
Well, thanks, Robert. Last but very not least, Terry.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Terry Schussler. I'm the Senior Director of Spatial Computing for Deutsche Telekom. I've been there for about 5 years, driving AR and VR B2B innovation, and also developing focus towards consumer use cases as well.
Great. So the format is really I'm going to talk to each of the panelists and get their views or case study that they've worked with, and then we're going to open up the discussions back and forth. So Janelle, one of the things that I was looking at in 2018, they said there was like 103 million lost days, accounting for $170 billion in lost revenue due to injuries. And I know when we talked previously, I was really excited to really hear what how you're using mixed reality to reduce the injuries on Deere. So maybe you can paint the picture and tell us a little bit, because I'm sure everybody's interested in that part.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started my work in the virtual reality world in John Deere, we were primarily just using it for investigating our new designs and to make our new designs better for our customers, which is phenomenal. We should be doing that. It makes the tractor at the end or the combine or whatever it is great for our customers. What we weren't doing was checking those designs for like assembly feasibility and things like that. And when you walk out onto a factory floor, you will be surprised at some of the assembly techniques that you see. Lots of those cause many of our injuries. So what I started doing, I said, let's take this VR technology that we have, let's bring in an experienced operator from the floor and have them walk through the assembly process in the VR lab. And so that's what we started doing. And so through that, we were able to see, okay, when they're having to torque this fitting, they're reaching full extension, they can't quite reach it, so then they're on their toes, there's a bend in their lower back, we can expect a high force on that lower back, which would probably result in an injury. And so we could go through that process and predict and identify where we thought we were going to see the big injuries happen. Then we could go in with our design team and say, how do we fix this? We were expecting to see like a shoulder injury out of this or a back injury. We need it lower, or we need a better tooling design, something like that, so that we can keep these employees in the best position possible and avoid this injury. And it has been so awesome to see the teams really work together, to see the teams from the floor, our assembly workers say, you know what, I have this idea, because they're the experts, quite honestly. And a lot of times they have good ideas on how to fix things. So they can say, if I was just a little closer, I'd be able to reach it better, something like that, and then have our design teams work with them and come up with something that will give them the proper placement and ultimately help avoid injury there. And so that has been really powerful for us and exciting to see. It's a little hard to track metrics on that since, typically injuries, when you track injuries, it's a lagging measure, right? We count them after they happen. But when we are looking at them ahead of time in the design and saying, well, we're fixing this design to avoid this potential injury, that's looking at it as a leading measure. And so what we've been tracking more instead of like injuries in that method or in that manner, we would say we've looked at so many processes, and that's more the measure we're tracking there. But I will say, as we designed one of our new combines, this is a good example. I think it's a little bit tangible and a good example of how we are really reducing injuries, and it shows. As we're designing our new combine, one of our big hitters historically over the years has always been working in the grain tank. You have to stand in it and bend over, and your back hurts and it stinks. And there hasn't really been, to be quite honest, it just stinks. But there's not much you can do about it. You have to be in the tank to reach, the bolts and connections, and they're below your waist. So you have to bend over or you have to kneel. And so historically we have had, it's one of our highest hitters as far as stations with back injuries, numerous injuries every year, or I guess I should say just complaints of back pain every year. So when we started designing the next combine, we said, okay, this is terrible. We have to fix this station. This is one of our top hitters. And if we can make this better, we can reduce a very large number of back injuries. So we took it to the VR lab and we said, the sky's the limit here. What do we want to do? Do we want to flip it all the way on its head? Do we want to have the person fly in space? Like, we can do anything in the VR lab. What's going to work? And so we were able to go through different iterations and determined that rotating the grain tank so that the employee could be standing on the floor or sitting on a stool, something like that, and then reach to the fittings, it looked like it was going to keep them in proper posture the whole time. We have not gone to full production with this process yet, but we did a limited production run of about 250 units, and I am happy to report we had no claims of back injuries or reports of back pain. And that to me speaks volumes. Normally in a run of 250 units, you would 100% have had some claims of things. And so to have a successful run like that, I'm really excited about it. And I think it really speaks to just the powerful use of VR and how we can really find those problem areas and reduce those injuries.
So thanks, Janelle. And yeah, you're right. Not only to reducing injuries, it's going to really add to the bottom line, and really from the end user is going to be using it, they're going to be a higher satisfaction.
Absolutely.
Jeff, I was looking at this report by a gentleman by Neil Patel, and they were saying that using product demos can increase purchases by 144%. I know when you and I were talking about Andersen windows, that there can be almost 1 billion different permeations of different styles, and I'm really interested to hear, how did you use AR to actually have it so it's demonstratable and drive some sales for your company?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because when we started this journey about 6 years ago, it was a thought we could do something different. Even back then, we had millions and millions of combinations, and we've grown since then. So it just got more complicated for us to actually provide a portfolio view of what we offer. And one of the things we looked at were the AR and VR technologies to try and figure out, is there opportunities there for us to actually leverage that and get out to the consumer some of the visuals that we were hoping they would see. And we took a couple of paths as we went down that. One of our businesses, we focused on a VR approach. In one of our businesses, we focused on an AR approach. And we'll talk more about the AR approach because it's kind of farther down the road today. But we have an in-home selling business that actually we get right in front of the consumers every day. And we actually provide them with like catalogs or web type applications where they could view the products. And it's been very successful. The challenge is that we always had the questions was, I'd really like to see what it looks like in my home though. So we took an approach to create what we do on my team is create proof of concepts around these technologies to understand, is it actually plausible to go out and do this? And we were able to take configured items into a 3D visualization through AR and actually represent the product in the home by placing it over top of the existing windows so they could physically see what they've chosen in their home. And kind of the nice thing about it is you look at 3D and you look at AR, if you can place that model, it doesn't matter where you look at it. We actually have people walk outside their home and take a look at the same window that they placed from inside of their home as you can see it project through the outside of their house, right? So those visuals for them got to be really compelling for us to say, hey, we've got something here. So over the last probably 2 years, we've put a focused effort on developing the AR program for that business. And I'm glad to say that it's out there. We've commercialized it. It's in every sales guy's toolbox today. And we have a roadmap on how we want to actually make that stronger. But it's been a game changer, to be honest with you. We are seeing the numbers starting to shift where close rates are better because people actually can see what they buy. Change requests are lowering because they could see what they bought and they didn't have to visualize it. When you think about our world where we're taking, we maybe have 50 colors and 50 different interior colors and stains and species and trim finishes that you need to try and figure out exactly what looks best in your home. It's really hard to visualize that stuff. What we've done is provide a capability to pick and choose and show those up against your wall colors or the type of home you're in or those different things, grill patterns in the windows. We're able to do that now visually in the home. So it's been a really good project. It's obviously there's challenges with it, but for the most part, it's paying off in spades right now.
Yeah, Jeff, I think a lot of people will be understanding and say, how do you create, there's just so many billions of combinations of models. How did you overcome that to be able to quickly, almost on the fly, to be able to take those permeations?
Yeah, so understanding the technology around the 3D models and how to apply the different types of offerings that we have in colors and species and things like that at a foundation level in the 3D database was a really good place for us to start. And then after we figured that out, then we had to figure out how actually we were going to run the configuration against that database. So we built our own configuration tool to actually be able to provide on-the-fly configured AR models that interact with our selling tool. So we built it, we designed it, we developed it, and we actually found a third party that worked really well with us to actually build it out to a commercial application. But yeah, there was nothing on the market that did that, so we actually built that.
That's really interesting. Robert, I know we had talked a little bit, and you wanted to bring up, you're doing some really exciting stuff, but I think you wanted to talk about sometimes not so much the pitfalls, but some of the challenges that can happen as you're using new and immersive technology and you're running across maybe an IT department that just hasn't been exposed to it. So I'd like for you to talk a little bit about that and some other case studies that you're working on. But I found it quite fascinating that, I thought what you had to say was really good for everybody to hear.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, we discovered something really exciting is that what happens when you unleash the passion of people. Very early when we were looking at VR I guess it was about 4 years ago, we found there were some people who did gaming at home, wrote games, and they were interested in exploring the technology inside the company. So we unofficially allowed them to do so. And we got some pretty amazing prototype applications out of that, some of which we use in the company. And the lesson learned for us is when we empower people to follow their passion, you have really unexpected results. And that for us was was really awesome. The other side of the coin is AR and VR is a fairly new technology. It doesn't really fit into what typically we work with in IT on the desktop. Requires beefier computers, different types of computers. On the VR side, for example, with the HoloLens, it really is a different device, and it connects differently into our network than our standard PCs do. And we've had a lot of challenges to work through with fitting it into our existing technology infrastructure. It's a long road, but it's one that is worth traveling down, and it's worth working through each of the hurdles, because we learn a lot about our technology. We learn a lot about how to make things better by doing that.
Well, thanks very much, Robert. That's great to hear, because I do know a lot of people are saying want to be able to bring it into the company, but have to navigate the decision-making process and sometimes the technological hurdles. So maybe we'll spend a little more time on that later on to see how everyone else overcame it. Terry, your company is just doing a ton of stuff, especially in the consumer space, both in entertainment and media creation. But I know your passion is you've been involved in it for such a long time, but how are you getting your company to get past the novelty factor? What do we need to do, or what do other companies need to do to say that it is a tool and it can drive ROI? Because we're really interested to see, what you're doing to push that through your company.
So it's very important to show what good looks like to people when they don't know what that is. I tell a story of when I asked my children to clean their room one time, and they went in and did what they thought was cleaning the room, and then I came back and it was still a mess. So I said, let's do this differently. I sat down, we cleaned the room together, and then I took a picture of that, printed it, and put it on the wall. And I said, the next time I ask you to clean a room, that's what good looks like. So painting the picture like that in the business environment with executives is very important. And so a combination of getting the devices into their hands and actually having them try the experiences out firsthand, so they tangibly understand what AR and VR means, was very, very critical for me to get engagement at the senior leadership level. The other thing was focusing on B2B innovation. We focus on a use case that had very clear ROI measurements, metrics that we could derive traction with internally in terms of, wow, you built that, it cost this much money, and we can see the outcomes. And so in our particular case, we focus on remote field support because that first time fix rate metric is such an easy one to lean into, that we could define, the parameters of what does good look like very well, and paint the picture afterwards of, this is what we spent, this is what the return was. From that, we continue to focus in on what's going to make get us away from the novelty is two things. So one is what I call time dirt of use cases. So where you put the device on and you use that use case for an extended period of time, 30 to minutes to 2 hours, and you're immersed in that use case, and it has a demonstrable value to you. That is why you're immersed in it for that long. And those kind of use cases that you use maybe once a week or a few times a month have enough tractionable value unto themselves to justify the capex of buying the device. And so that's where we start to get that traction of like, well, we only use one use case for this, but we're going to use it for an extended period of time each time we use it. The second thing is frequent, and this focuses a little bit more on the consumer side of it instead of the B2B side, and that's going to be the frequency of use. So I put the glasses on and I do a number of different things for very short periods of time, but I wear the glasses all day long or for an extended period of time as well, even though the interactions I'm doing are not use case specific, but it's a multitude of different interactions. And this is where we're going to see the AR glasses market transition to over the next 18 months as Facebook and Apple and other players bring their devices and these kind of ecosystems to play. So you might think of it like an Apple Watch on your face kind of experience, where you get notifications and short pieces of data that are time sensitive, that are contextual to where you're looking, where you are standing, what time of day it is, what your calendar says you should be doing right now. And all of those personalized pieces of data will then flow the decision making as to what data you're going to see on the glasses at a given point in time. And we're still early on that. We're very, very early. We're just starting that transition from what I call the heads down society of walking around looking at our cell phones all the time, cell phone on the table, we're distracted because we're looking at the screen, to a heads up society where, we're making eye contact with each other all the time, and we might get extra information in our field of view, but we're not taking away from the real world interaction that we're having. So we're just on the very, very early cusp of that transition.
Oh, thanks, Terry. It's nice. The fact, when you're talking about use it once weekly, use it a lot daily is kind of an interesting way of looking at a lot of things. So Janelle, I think one of the things that, I think everybody would be interested in is, the work that you're doing. How did you get funding? Did you own budget? Did you have to go to a particular business unit? Where did you go to get your funding? And how much of it is a challenge that in a lot of cases, there is a lag between the development to being able to prove it out. And I'm sure a lot of people want to know, what is the right approach?
Yeah. So when I started, there was an established virtual reality lab at the facility I was at, but it was just used for design. And so when I initially started looking at manufacturing reviews, it was simple. If the lab was available, I could just use that. However, then when I transferred facilities, my next facility did not have a VR lab. And so I started having to talk about that with some engineering teams, like, guys, we really need to look at this virtually. We can save time and money on your designs, because we all know anytime you design something, there's lots of iterations. And a lot of times historically, we would find these problem areas at a limited production build, and then it's very costly to go back and fix them. And so I started really talking with the engineering teams, like, look, we can save a lot of time and money on your designs if we look at this ahead of time, and it'll be less of a headache for everybody. I won't have to hound you as the ergo engineer that this isn't right, and you won't be mad at me at the end. So we took some trips up to the established lab, just to show that, to do a few example runs. And then I did have to go to capital committee and basically present that pitch. Here's the examples we looked at. Here's how it will save us time and money, and really prove that to leadership that, design time is very valuable. And if you can make your design right the first time, or go through those design iterations before it's a physical product, you will save so much time and money, and that return on investment will be just tenfold. It's great. And so for me, that was my path, just presenting that to leadership and to that capital committee, and receiving the funds to implement new labs. And so I guess that's what I would say there. That's what we have to prove. Just
did you show a sample? Did you show a sample of your VR, or was it? You did show that. Okay. Because that's going back what Terry says, it is important, and Robert says it's really important to be able to show it. So Jeff, I know it's a little bit different with you. I think you said, like, when I hear there was a significant investment, and did you go through the business sales business units or the product? What was your way? Because you seem to have complete buy-in, and how long did that take?
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I think I echo a lot of what you've heard from the other panelists here. It takes a passion to stay with this, for one thing, because it is a journey. You're not going to make this happen overnight, because this technology in some people's mind is way out there, and compared to what they do. We're a 115-year-old company. There's a big ship to turn, but you have to stay with it, right? And I think that when we found use cases all over the place, and kind of unlike Janelle, we actually ended up building our own lab. We didn't have one, so that was part of our program as well, because what we figured out really early in the process, and just food for thought when you're doing this, is proof of concepts are worth every penny you put into them, right? Because if you can show what's possible, it doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be exactly what you're going to be doing, but it gives them that mental image of what's actually possible as well. And that's one of the bigger hurdles you're going to find when it comes to pulling money out of the business to work on things like this, right? So we did that. One thing that there's two things I would say that in our case, hardware, we went through all kinds of different sets of hardware. It changes every year, right? Technologies get much better. And, I've got shelves of hardware that we've tried out, sitting there. But you have to do that because you need to understand where it's going in this technology. So, and it's quite frankly, it's not that expensive. When you look at the big picture, buying a few sets of hardware is not a big cost. What we found out our costs was actually the content. Building out the 3D databases and building out the configuration capabilities and all the makeability rules or whatever you're going to put into it. That's where you're going to spend your time. And that's what you have to be prepared to focus on, because without that, the rest of this doesn't run. Right. So I would tell anybody that's going to get into it, make sure you understand, kind of what it's going to take after you've launched it for day 2, because you're going to have to support it as well. And that's probably was our biggest lift in this whole thing, was actually building the content that we were going to show in this, and getting it ready to go.
So was it an iOS, or did you do it in Android, or did you have it for both?
So it's a really good question. One of our companies is solely wrapped around iOS in their business model, and the other company is anything, right? Anything's possible. So what we had to try and do is figure out exactly what platform was neutral as possible, and then we build or compile to the language for the company that we're going to do it in. Now technology's changing a little bit, and with some of the upgrades that Apple has done to some of their products, it's been really good for the company that we actually went to market with, AR. There's a big focus there. But yeah, it's one for all and all for one in this thing. You can't necessarily choose a device, because when you're dealing with a consumer, you have no idea what they have in their hand when they're trying to run something. So you kind of have to play the gamut here. Now, you don't have to do it all at once. So you need to start and move into it, but we had a plan for everything.
So having said that, so Robert, I know your company built for other companies. So have you sat on a platform? Are you agnostic? Is your primary focus AR or VR? I asked a bunch of questions, but I'm pretty interested because I do know that you're behind the scenes for a lot of companies that are using it. So pretty interesting to see what your philosophy is on that.
Yeah, our products go into the vehicle, and you rarely see them. They're axles, they're transmissions, drivetrain, safety equipment. And we decided early on to focus on the Microsoft mixed reality platform. We saw the HoloLens as a game-changing device, and we're still primarily focused on that platform, both on the mixed reality headset HoloLens, as well as the immersive mixed reality with the immersive headsets. That doesn't mean we haven't looked at other devices. We have done some things with Android and iOS, and we have looked at a couple of the other immersive devices like Vive, or some companies. We've got devices on the shelf from companies that no longer exist. But it's interesting to try those things, because even if they turn out not to be viable, you always learn something by experimenting. And experimentation is very important, because no matter what you learn, you can apply it in other areas. And since we're focused primarily on an internal development team, it's allowed us to develop that expertise and that flexibility in-house, and then apply it as we need to, as we move forward on the journey.
Well, thank you very much. Now, Terry, you're a little bit different, because you've got to satisfy a consumer audience, and then if you're saying for field services, it's your employees. So in your position, how do you make a case for whether should adopt AR, and on what platform, and what's the best use? So how do you go about that?
Well, so for B2B use cases, we don't concern ourselves with issues like app store ecosystems and things like that, because we're controlling the flow of delivery, in many cases preloading the device with the software that's needed, and and curating the flow of the delivery to the end customer. So that's a lot easier in many respects. You can target a device that's specific to the requirements of the project a little bit more carefully there. With the consumer-facing side, then we do have to think about those ecosystem issues, and what people already have in their hands in terms of devices. So, for example, with field support, we actually built it as a mobile phone application, because that's what people have in their pocket when they're out in the field doing work on equipment. And so, they're not going to have the glasses yet. But we also started to target the AR glasses, looking at the roadmap for that. We showcase, for example, the field support project, which is called AR Field Advisor, on the Nreal Light glasses last December, to give people a sense of what the transition is going to be like when you put the phone in your pocket, or you're not staring at your screen, you're staring at the car engine you're trying to repair, and you're getting guidance from an expert over the shoulder right in front of you, visually, a holographic annotation right on the engine, instead of looking at a still picture that somebody screen captured on their phone or on their desktop and then annotated manually. So it's a different experience, and we have to show that to people. Again, showing people what good looks like. On the device selection, we have to look at the long arc. Agreed that there's a constant sort of cycle of devices that are coming to the marketplace, and I'd say that the cadence is typically about every 18 months you see a sea change. That's accelerating right now, so we're being mindful of that. And but you also have to, because I've been doing this a long time, especially with AR devices. Well, actually with both. Everybody's going to take longer than they say. So all the glasses companies that come out with a prototype at CES, and they say we're going to ship this at the end of the year, and then it's really probably the end of the next year. So you have to be very patient with your expectations about the flow of equipment from prototype to commercial quality, solution. It tends to be a year after they say.
So, it's interesting when, we talk about devices. I know, our application that we have, we initially went all app, and then we found that a lot of our consumers who do want help, don't want to have to download an app and want to be able to experience AR through the web. Is anybody seeing that as well, that even though the app is where it's at, especially from people sometimes still a little hesitant downloading their app? Has anybody experienced that? Because we're starting to see a little bit of that.
Well, I'll dive in on that. Just real quick, number one is 100% yes, especially for sales and marketing purposes. WebXR delivery of content is, a very hot topic, because there's no App Store ecosystem needed at all for that. You just give people an endpoint, they click it, boom, they're in the content, and they get the interactive experience, whether it's on a mobile phone or a desktop. But the hard truth of it is WebXR still is nowhere near what you can do with a native device. And so you've got a lot of limitations and reality check that you have to put on yourself when you go to say, oh, I'll just take this really great, HoloLens project and I'll just put it on a web page, and then they won't even need the HoloLens. No, that's not going to be realistic.
Okay, Jeff, you were going to say something?
Yeah, no, we're working on that as well right now, is because the new AR formats that are coming out, USDZ and those type of formats, they're very light and they're very easy to get on your web pages, right? And you're creating them from basically the content you'd have in your app or whatever. We're seeing a lot of use for that. I think Pokemon Go probably was a huge driver for people to want to, they know they can see it on their phone. Why can't I see product on my phone, right? So I think that's going to be more than less here in the future, and we're kind of lining up with that one as well. So.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to go around to everybody and say, if someone asks you that they wanted to start bringing in AR, VR to be able to, help on their ROI, what's the one caution or the one thing they should look at? Robert, what would you suggest for someone who wants to really adopt it? What would you advise them to do or not to do?
I would advise them to involve their IT technical, the infrastructure department very early on, so that they're totally integrated in with understanding the new devices and the new methodologies to get it to fit within the organization.
Fantastic. Janelle, what about you?
I would say be careful to pick the right device and the right tech and the right software to go with that device. There are so many great devices available, and there's a lot of combinations you can do between an HTC Vive headset or an Oculus headset, and then there's different softwares that can display what you need, at least in my experience, and they all have pros and cons. But when you are displaying something to leadership, trying to prove a point, some of those work better than others, and some are more user-friendly than others. And so I would say just make sure you have the right combination. so that you can best show your point, I guess.
Okay, well, thank you. Terry?
Think about the user first. Everything should be user first. And keep in mind that it's not like somebody pulling a phone out of their pocket where, hey, you want to use my phone? You can make a phone call with it. They have no experience. I mean, 0.00001% of the planet has ever actually seen a VR device, let alone put it on their head, which is why I made the point in the beginning about getting people to put it on and try it out to get that experience. So don't forget to include acclimation, first-time user experience flow into the design of your product, so that welcome to VR. This is your first time, a sort of assumption on every user that comes into your project, because that way you'll have better first-time flow. Look at the Oculus Quest and the first-time run experience of that product out of the box, and how you go through the learning flow of how to work with the device, and mirror that inside your application conceptually.
It's, as J.J. Abrams said, it's all about the experience, right? It is all about the experience.
Yeah.
Jeff Lien, a last word to you.
I would echo what these guys said too, but one of the things that I learned over this program is educate people around you, even though they don't know what they need that for. Because what I'm finding is that they're finding their own use cases, and they're spending their own functional money on trying to come up with something. There's a lot of smart people in your organizations. And as you start working with your IT department and educating them on what you're doing, they will go to the IT department, and pretty quick, they're piecing it all together, and it's going to make, the downstream thing much easier. So you can't own the world, you can't boil the ocean with it, but share when you do this.
Okay, before we wrap up, we got, maybe 30 seconds for each of you. Is there anything else that you'd like to bring up for the audience? Because I think we've learned a lot of really fantastic things here. But is there anything else that maybe you might want to say? And I'll just start with Terry.
Just as I said, think about the user needs before you think about the technical. Don't let the technology drive all the decision making in the design of your projects or why you're doing things. Like Janelle's focus on, human safety, human comfort, and health. That mindset needs to be first and foremost in everything that you do with AR and VR, because it's really about the user and bringing the user forward. Augmenting the human is why we call it augmented reality. And so that's what I would suggest.
Robert?
Yeah, my advice would be, don't be afraid to fail. Because if you're not trying things and failing, you're not learning. I mentioned a couple of times our experiences with our IT department, and we had a lot of things I would do differently there, and some of those I've mentioned here. But all of them were learning for us and for IT and for the other folks in IT. And I think having that mindset of failure is learning helps get you to own these journeys where the road in front of you is not defined. You're building the road as you go.
Well, thank you very much, Janelle.
I guess I would say keep pushing, even if you hit roadblocks. Sometimes when we present this new technology, especially as it continues to emerge and develop, sometimes when we present that to leadership or different teams within your organization, you might get some pushback, and you might get some, no, you're crazy, that won't work. But like Terry has said, once they see it, they'll be believers. And so push through, show them examples of why it's worth it and how it can help your company and your customers. Thank
you very much. Jeff?
I think everything everybody said is true for me. I mean, the one thing I would say is, don't go at it like you have the answers at the beginning. You are going to learn so much stuff that you never really thought you'd come up with. Even the hardware platforms and things that you think you're going to start with are not the ones you're going to end up with at the end. And just be open to it. Be open to input and reach out to other businesses like this and learn from them. It'll make life a lot easier.
So listen, guys, that's great advice from everybody, and I want to thank every one of you. The information you provided is really incredibly valuable. So once again, that ends our session. Now we'll open it up for Q&A. Thank you very much.